Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on simulating cards. So, as you can see, we have a very similar setup to what we've had in the last couple of videos. We have a graphic representing the draw pile, and then we have a hand of 5 cards. But we have some new stuff underneath it. We have these boxes which are ticked, but which I can click in and that unticks them. Or if I change my mind, if I want it to be ticked again, I can click in it and tick again. And then we have a message that says uncheck any cards you want to discard and have replaced, then click to continue. So in this particular case, I'll just keep the ace, I guess. And I click to continue. And luckily I drew a joker, and so I have a pair. And now we have this graphic here representing the discard pile. The code for this has been in the program, but so far we haven't had any way of discarding cards. So now that we have a way of discarding cards, we now see this thing representing the discard pile. So let's have a look at the code that allows that to happen. So there's one new page, which is this one, discard and replace. There are a couple of small changes in these other pages, these existing pages, and there's a couple of new variables that we need to look at. So let's look at the new variables first. The first new variable that we need to look at is $D. $D is an array. Each slot of the D array corresponds to a slot in the H array and corresponds to a card in the hand. So they start at slot 0, they go up to a number that's 1 less than the number of cards in hand. So in this case we have 5 cards, although we could change that quite easily with just with the change to $I, which is the hand size. But because we've got 5 cards, $D uses slots 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and $H uses slots 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. In the case of $H, each slot is a number that tells the computer what card is in that slot in the hand. $D, it's all 1s or 0s. 1 meaning that the player wants to keep the card, 0 meaning that they want to discard it. And on the first screen, when we had those checkboxes and we were clicking in them, that was changing the values in the D array. So let's start by looking at display hand, I think. So as you will remember, it's a HTML table. There's quite a lot of lines, but it's not as complicated as its length would suggest, because HTML tables just require a lot of lines to lay out if it's a table of any complexity. There's a couple of minor changes. I've had to change. I had the picture representing the draw deck and the blank picture, which was used for spacing, I had that in the same cell, in the same TD, and I had to split it up into 2 because it was having them in the same cell was creating problems with how it displayed. It would sometimes display one of the pictures on top of the other, whereas we wanted them all to be side by side, and putting it in separate cells fixed that. And similarly, I had to split up these pictures that represent discard pile. I had to split that up into 2 cells where it was 1 cell. But the main change that we get is down here. This is on the second row. So the first row up to here is displaying the pictures of the cards. Now we have this if $R does not equal 1, that's what exclamation mark equals means. It means it does not equal. If that's the case, then we have all this code here, which prints a whole row. That's what the TR and the /TR tell us. It prints a whole row, and that row is the checkboxes. So first we have a couple of blank cells. Those are the cells where we have the discard pile picture and the blank picture. We need to get the checkboxes under the pictures of the cards in the hand. So that's what this is. We have a for loop. It goes from, for z equals 0, z is less than h dot length. Note that it's less than, not less than or equals. Usually when I do a for loop, it's less than or equals. And then z plus plus as normal. So what that means is it won't go up to h dot length. What the less than rather than a less than equals means is it won't go up to h dot length. It means it'll go up to h dot length minus 1. So because there's 5 cards, h dot length will be 5, and so it will go from 0 to 4, which are the slots that we need. And each time it'll print this line of code. And to make it a bit easier to see what's happening, I'll type out the code that it will print. And we'll just look at that. Oops, sorry. 2D align equals center. Actually, I'll put it on separate lines. It doesn't put it on separate lines, but it's a bit easier to see what's happening if we put it on separate lines. So I'll do that. Okay, so it'll print code that's a little bit like this. It'll actually print, the thing that changes is this number. So it'll print code that's basically that, and then it'll print, because it's a for loop, the next run through, it'll print the same code again, except for it has D1, and then it'll do it for D2, D3, D4. Except without the, it'll actually all be on one line, but it's easier for humans to deal with if it's laid out like this. So this and this are quite simple. We have TD align equals center, which means start a cell of the table, and anything that's printed in the cell is going to be in the middle of the cell, because we want it obvious to be which checkbox relates to which card. So we don't want the checkbox to be right sort of against the left edge of the cell, which is where it would be by default. We want it to be in the middle and sort of it's easily seen which card it's referring to. And then we just have /TD, which means that's the end of this particular cell. And then we have this checkbox command. You can see that it's a Twine command, a Twine specific command, not a HTML one, because it's got 2 less than signs at the start and 2 greater than signs at the end, whereas HTML commands have 1 of each. So let's go through it. Checkbox, that just tells the computer, I want you to set up this box that can be clicked, and clicking on it moves it to ticked if it's unticked, or if it's ticked and clicked, then it goes to unticked. It changes its state between 2 states. Sorry, I actually missed out on a bit there. The variable name has to be in quotes. That's what these slash quotes are. It's telling them to put a quotation mark in the string rather than observe that as being the end of the string. So we have checkbox. We have the variable that is being manipulated by the checkbox is $D square bracket 0 end square bracket. So that variable can be a slot in an array, but it could also be a single. It could also be R or something like that if we wanted to, if we had a need to do that. And it has to be in quotation marks. This is the state that or the value that this variable should have when it is not checked. This is the value that it should have when it is checked. So I've put a fairly simple one, 0 or 1, but we could have strings in here instead if we wanted to. We could have yes and no, or we could have, you know, whatever was relevant to the program. But in this case, it's just very simple, 0 or 1. And at the end, we've got this to say that it is ticked at the start. It starts by being ticked, and then you can untick it. If we didn't do that, it would be unticked. But it seemed a bit more logical to have everything ticked and then give the player the opportunity to untick things. I'm not sure if that's how other people are going to feel, but that's what I went with. So we have this row of checkboxes, and we also have to have a button to continue, because the checkboxes will change the variables, but they won't allow you to progress through the program. So later on, and I've changed this to be, previously the only option we had was determining the hand. Now I've had to, instead of printing it out, I've had to do one of those things where we put it into a variable and then we print the variable, and we're using the variable $M. So that is the other new variable. It's this variable that's a string of text that is then printed and is code. So we've had to slightly change determine hand so that instead of just telling you, instead of just printing you have 2 pairs, it actually sets M to be you have 2 pairs, or whatever it might be. So we can see at the end of determine hand, instead of just having a message, a text message, it says set M equals M plus you have, and then it says 5 of a kind, straight flush, 4 of a kind, whatever is relevant. Okay, so let's go back to this. So we set $M to be equal to TD colspan equals whatever I is, the number of cards, a line equals center. So this will, when it eventually prints, it will do something like this. So this is another TD, i.e. starter HTML cell, and again it's aligned to the center because we want the message to be sort of in the middle rather than if it was on the left it would look a bit funny. And we have this col span. What that means is column span. It means that the cell is not just a square in the grid. It means that it's 5 cells wide. Or whatever this number is. This will change, as you can see, it changes with $I, which is the number of cards in hand. It'll be centered to the display of the cards. In other words, it'll cover all of the columns that are printing the different cards and printing the, if relevant, printing the checkboxes underneath them. So we set M equal to that, and then what we do next depends on the value of R, this variable that's going to be set to 1 the second time we display it. So if R is equal to 1, then we determine the hand, but the first time we do this, R won't be 1, so that won't trigger, this else will trigger. And in that, we set R equal to 1, so that next time it'll go to this one. So we don't, if we didn't do this, if we didn't set R equal to 1, then it would just keep giving us the opportunity to discard cards forever, sort of thing. And of course we don't want that. We only want it to happen once. So we set R equal to 1, we add to $M the message uncheck any cards you want to discard and have replaced, then, and we have this button that says click to continue. So again, I'll type out what this will be. So this is telling us that there is a button, that the message on the button will be click to continue. And because that message has spaces in it, we need to surround that with quotes. If it was a single word, if we just had continue, like that, we could have it in quotes, but we wouldn't have to. We could just do it like that, and that would be fine. But as it is, we need those quotes. And then the next bit is what page is it going to once the person clicks the button. And again, it's got spaces in it, so we need to enclose that within quotes. And again, if it was a one word, if we just called the page discard, we could put it in quotes. That wouldn't generate any errors, but we could also have it like that. Then we have slash button, and in the middle here, if we wanted any code to execute when the button was clicked, we'd put it in there, but we don't. Then that ends the if. So either way, we add a slash TD to $M, and then we print M. So the first time we end up in the display hand page, we'll have that message. We'll have the checkboxes, and then we'll have the message saying, choose which cards you want and click to continue. We will do so. We will click it, and it'll take us to this discard and replace, which is where most of the new code is. So let's have a look at discard and replace. Once again, we have a for loop, and once again it goes from 0 to less than h.length, so it'll go to 1 less than h.length. And what it's going to do is it's going to look at each slot in the $D array. So it's going to say, well, does he want to keep this card? Does he want to keep this? Or he, whatever. Does the player want to keep this card? Okay, what about this one? What about this one? And for each one that they do want to discard, and we know they want to discard it because DZ is equal to 0, we're going to do all of these things. So, what are these things? Well, we set W square bracket $D square bracket $Z N square bracket equal to 2, and I just realized that is not right. I'm so annoyed. Should be H. All right, sorry about that. I'll fix that. I'm not going to retake that. I'll just plow through. Okay, I'll fix that in the version that's on itch.io, so it'll look like this. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, h.z or $H is an array that has what cards are being held. So we might have something like this. We might say H0 is 17, H1 is 34, H2 is 6, etc. Right? It'll have these different numeric values, and they represent whatever, the Jack of Spades, the 4 of Diamonds, the 6 of Clubs, and so on. So what is $W? $W is an array that keeps track of where all the cards are. So in this setup, all the cards are either in the draw deck, which is where they all start, they're in hand, or they're in the discard pile. So what it will do, what this code will do, is it'll look at HZ. So let's say Z is 0. It'll look at H0 and it'll say, H0, that's 17. So because the player has indicated, because D0 is equal to 0, that means the player has indicated that they want to discard that particular card. So that means that that card is not going to be in hand anymore. It's going to be in the discard pile. So it will say, all right, W17 should then be set to 2, because 2 indicates that it's in the discard pile. So that bit of code does is it updates the W array and says, hey, that card, number 17 or 34 or whatever it is, that card, it did have a value of 1, meaning that it was in hand. Well, now it should have a value of 2, meaning that it's discarded. And that doesn't have a lot of effect in the setup as it is, but if you were playing another round, then you wouldn't want, if you're playing another round without reshuffling, and I don't think that's how poker works. I think you're meant to shuffle the deck after each hand, but in a lot of card games, you don't reshuffle the deck until you run out of cards. So if you've seen a card and discarded it, you don't want to get that card again until the deck is reshuffled. So therefore, that's why we need this W array. For more elaborate games, we would need to keep track of the fact that it had been seen this run through of the deck. Then we reduce C0 by 1 and we increase C2 by 1. C0 and C2 are C0 is the number of cards in the draw deck and C2 is the number of cards in the discard pile. We're discarding a card and drawing a replacement. So the net result of that is there's one more card in the discard pile and there's one fewer card in the draw pile. There's the hand size does change, but it's reduced by 1 and then increased by 1. So we don't make any. There's no point making any change to it. Now, if we were playing a sort of longer, more elaborate game, we'd need to check whether the draw pile had been exhausted, because it's possible that we might have to draw a card, but there are no cards in the draw pile anymore. Usually what you do in that case is you turn the discard pile into the draw pile in a real card game. Sometimes it means the end of the game, but either way, we would have to check that. But we're not doing that now because in a single hand of poker, you can't exhaust the deck. As in one player playing, you'll get 5 cards, and at most you'll discard 5 cards. So at most you'll go through 10 cards, and of course there's 54 cards in the deck. So we don't need to worry about that. And then we include draw card. That's the same page we were using at the start of the game when we were drawing our initial hand. There's a slight change to this one in that originally this command was in draw card. This command where we basically draw card chooses the number of a card and it makes sure that that card is one that's in the draw deck. Originally, this command, which updates the $H array, i.e. the hand, was in the draw card page, but we're not putting this new card into h.length anymore. In this particular one, we're putting it into $HZ, so it might be any of the slots. So instead, so having that line in there, having that line in draw card didn't make any sense. So I moved it out of there, put it in deal hand, and then in discard and replace, we have this different command. So what happens is it $Y is the number of the card that it's randomly chosen. So we give that slot of the H array the value Y. I won't go through draw card because I've gone through it in detail in previous videos, but just know that it is the page that chooses a random card, says, is this card in the draw pile? If it isn't, then it goes, well, that's not a valid choice, and chooses again. But eventually it will pick one that's in the draw pile, at least if there is a draw pile. And in the game as set up, there always will be cards left because we can't exhaust the deck. And then it puts that chosen number into the relevant slot of H back rather this page takes the number that it was given, which is in $Y, and puts it in the relevant slot of the H array. And then when we've done that, when we've replaced all the cards that need to be replaced, we go back to display hand. We display it for the second time, but this time R will be equal to 1. And so we won't get the checkboxes, we won't get the continue button. Instead, we'll get the description of the hand that we ended up with. You have a pair, you have nothing, whatever it might be. And that is how we do discarding cards and drawing new ones. So what I would like to do in future videos is look for a little while at games that are more like collectible card games or trading card games. In other words, games that are more like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. I don't know what the Pokemon card game is, but anyway, the Pokemon card game or Magic the Gathering, or there's many others as well. That works in a different way, with the main feature being that the player constructs their own deck. So there's sort of at least two phases to the game. There's you construct your deck from all of the cards that are possible, and then there's shuffling the deck and playing the deck and so on. What we've been doing thus far is just the shuffling the deck and dealing cards, of course, because normal card games use a predetermined deck. You don't get to choose your own deck when you're playing poker, of course. So that's what I would like to look at in future, in the immediate future. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.